G'day guys, and welcome to Warrior by Design with Benjamin John. I'm your host. As always, I promise you we're going to get some guests in here, people that have been there and done it, people that have actually are living the life that, some of us are wanting and or hoping for, and even thinking that it's out of reach. So I've got with me today the beautiful Eesha Patel. Eesha is a spiritual coach, mentor. She's practiced and taught meditation as well as energetic healing for more than 20 years. This has been a field that she's well versed in and exploring for herself day in and day out, continually educating herself on what it is that is out there. She is an international energy healer, author, channeler. She's a spiritual coach and has worked with entrepreneurs, world-class entrepreneurs, coaches who have run multi-million-dollar businesses. So we're not talking about people. She has worked from people from the start to the finish, from her journey to where she is today. But now she's really focusing on those that are willing and wanting to make a change in this world. She's created her own multi-dimensional energetic healing modality called Origin Activation, and I believe it's also called the Origin Method. She helps others break free of their barriers or what they may see as limitations to be able to access parts of themselves that they may not have even seen through the 13 dimensions and all the energetic spectrums that is available to us. Although she's helped high-level entrepreneurs break through their business goals, she also is most gratified by serving alongside her clients in their shared mission and bringing more light into the world, raising the planet's vibration. Within the last 5 years, Eesha's worked with more than 10,000 people to become leaders in Origin Activation and meet their highest selves and their highest potential. Welcome to the show, Eesha Patel. How are you?
Thank you. What a beautiful introduction. I'm very well today and excited to share in this conversation with you.
Thank you very much. Glad to have you here. So look, Eesha, as with these guys, I've been doing episode after episode, and basically what I'm trying to do, and we've had discussions about where I want to go with this warrior thing and the warrior by design previously, but basically what I want to do is really bring down what we may know to be true in some of our lives or our experiences, and even those that are, potentially world leaders, where I can see you're totally heading. What I want to do is really bring that back to the baseline and really try and make this understandable or even achievable or to be seen as something that other people can reach, right? So the everyday person. So that's where I'm at today, and that's what I want to try and bring to the table. So Eesha, can I ask you, the journey we have come from to where you are today, what would you see as your main key things to be able to, that allowed you to perceive your reality differently from back in the days of, I believe you've come from, you actually were living in India and moved to Australia. So you've actually gone through the whole migration, you've gone through the whole, all that sort of stuff to where we are today. What would be your key, I suppose, key pillars or key principles that allowed you to achieve what you have today?
I'd say the number one thing that's been the absolutely most beneficial is doing my daily meditation practice. That is absolutely non-negotiable in my life. And regardless of whatever else that's going on in my reality, whether it's business, whether it's personal, whether it's just life, that we all live, I think it's that daily meditation practice done consistently. It's small things done consistently that get the biggest results. And I definitely wouldn't be here where I am today without having this incredible tool by my side just to get me through every single day and give me the insight and wisdom that I've needed to build my business and move forward in that.
Yeah, 100%, Eesha, and I'll have to agree that meditation certainly changed my life also. If we were to take it back a bit further, let's go back to Eesha, back in India, who's first migrated into Australia. Now, I imagine you would have come across some quite a large, potentially some large struggles and some large hurdles you would have had to overcome to where you are today. Now, if we go back to that Eesha Patel growing up within Australia, what would you say would be your key things that allowed you to start seeing the world differently, right? Because this is I suppose a bit of an assumption, but I would imagine that you would have come to this world with potentially wide open eyes, but also an unsureness and some sort of, am I secure? Am I not? Some safety concerns or whatever coming to a whole new country. what allowed you to be able to shift from that perspective to one that was of exploration and creating your own reality?
Right, that's a great question. Well, I actually left India when I was quite young. So I was 5 when I left. My whole family moved over. So in terms of the struggle and the challenges of that regard, I think I just followed along what my family was doing. I do remember having some challenges in school because so we spoke Gujarati and Hindi back in India, and I didn't know that much English. So I do recall going to, extra classes and stuff like that just to really, learn how to fit into society. And it was one of those things where even at a young age, I could sense that I was different. And this was actually in New Zealand. So we went from India to New Zealand and then New Zealand to Australia a few years later. And in both of those shifts, it's like when you're the new kid in school, you have that sense of, oh, other people are not like me. And little things like even coming from New Zealand to Australia, I didn't realize that I had picked up at that point a Kiwi accent. And so my very first school in Australia, the kids would be like, say sheep or say tree. And I couldn't understand why they were laughing at me, because I couldn't tell that I was saying things in a different way to them. And so there's definitely been that from a young age, that resilience to, to just, I mean, at the basic level to belong, to be a part of the society, to learn how to make friends. And part of that, I did move schools many times. I think I went to about 7 or 8 different primary schools growing up. So I never really had that sense of stability. So I guess what I learned from that is that one, things are always changing. If we take it back to that sort of Zen philosophies, things are very, very transient in nature. And as a child, I learned to get very comfortable with that because I knew that things were just going to change and then they would change again and they would change again. And so on the one hand, it was, lack of attachment, but on the other, it was also recognizing my strength in that because it gave me self-sufficiency. See, I didn't need the people around me. I didn't need to be in the same house. Like the things that most people consider to be safety and security, I was uprooted that many times. I just didn't have that. And even now, I mean, I know, Ben, my life. Like I was traveling for the last year. This is the first time in a long time that I've actually just stayed put for more than like 4 months, And so being in that constant state of transition, you learn how to deal with stress for starters, because there's they say that the 3 most challenging things in life are getting divorced, moving house, and changing jobs. And I was doing those consistently for years on end, just like not having any level of stability in so many areas of my life. And there was a point, actually, even just a few months ago, where it was a week to week. Like I wouldn't know where I'm living next week. And then the next week again, I'd have to find somewhere else. And next week again, I'd have to find somewhere else. And so what most people take for granted, I've been in these situations of constant transience, constant change. And so you learn to get very resilient with yourself and you learn to find that home within yourself. So it's not about the material things. It's not about where you're living. It's not about even the friends or the people around you, because even that changed. Every time I changed schools, every time I changed cities, every time I changed countries, I made new friends. I found a new sense of groundedness, and then that got uprooted again and again and again. And so I guess, for me, there was a lot of learning in that from a very young age of just recognizing that life is going to be what it's going to be. And you can't let those things prevent you from being the person that you want to be, because you can be yourself, whatever that means to you, regardless of your external situation. So when you're plonked in the middle of some random country with no friends, you don't know where you're living, you get dropped off at some airport, without the next step ahead of you, you can be resilient and self-sufficient enough in yourself to go, you know what, I'm going to be okay. I trust my own guidance. This universe is looking after me and everything is fine.
Yeah, totally, Eesha. And look, even, like though our journeys from a child, as from children, would be very different. I can also resonate with that a little bit too from my own experiences, right? Like I've had conversation with my kids, today, and in the last couple of years, where I remember being a kid and being only 13, 14 years old, or even younger than that at times, where I'll be going from the western suburbs in Victoria to the city, going on trains to the other side of Melbourne, all this sort of stuff. And I had no idea what I was doing. Like I just get in there and I'll be like asking people around, oh, how do I get to such and such? How do I do this? How do I do that? And I think, obviously, a bit of my background as well, going to the military and all that sort of stuff, and uprooted and moved and, leaving everything behind when I went to the army and all sorts of things. And I definitely have some resonance with that as well, that I think the more that I was able to not be really attached to things, and that doesn't mean we can't have those securities. That doesn't mean we can't have those, those beautiful, secure locations and beautiful homes to go back to and blah, blah, blah. I think for me, if I look at that, it's more about me having the belief potentially that I need those things, and I need them to be who I am, and I need them to be secure. And the more that I was able to let go of those things, and the more that I was able to realize, as you know, like moving states, buying a house sight unseen, doing all the things that I've done recently, people would say it was ludicrous. But the more that I've been able to do that, I can see that there's so much more potential that's out there to be achieved, through being vulnerable in certain situations and being allowed to be uncomfortable, that has made my life shift from where I was to where I wanted to go. Can you speak a little bit of that for yourself in regards to, because you did touch on how that actual, I wouldn't say lack of security, because you found security in yourself, right? So I would say that not having that attachment potentially, how that has really allowed you to grow or take opportunities that maybe you wouldn't have had you have had a little bit more of a need for security around some of those things.
Yeah, I'm notorious for taking leaps of faith, which I'm sure you know all about.
Yeah.
I think what it's done is allow me to trust something that's greater than myself. I mean, for me, my spirituality is such a big part of my life, and we think that we need all these things in order to help us feel safe. But the reality of it is that I feel just as safe in one place as I do in another. And so that safety, that sense of safety comes from inside of myself. And, there's that whole thing of you create your reality, there's vibration, there's all of that. And so for me, I guess it's just, not being attached to the things that I think I need. It actually has opened up gateways into things that I couldn't have imagined. I mean, my first business is a perfect example of that, because my journey into, being a spiritual mentor and doing this kind of work was actually coming out of a relationship, and the tail end of that relationship was the catalyst to my spiritual awakening, and then led very quickly into my first business. And my first business was a wellness studio. Now, if you'd asked me 6-7 years ago, I never would have said that that was something that I wanted to do. But at that time, I was attached to the white picket fence life. And I mean, I really had it all on paper. I was engaged to a beautiful person, had this, incredible ring on my finger, was staying in a house, like everything. I ticked all the boxes as per the standard reality that people think people want. And so I had it all to some extent, right? And then when all of that it sort of left my reality, the first thing that happened for me was I ended up with a blank canvas. I had a blank slate all over again. And the creation that came from that never would have happened if I'd stayed attached to the things that I thought I wanted. Because I thought I wanted the partner, the house, the kids, that sort of life. And it was something that I just grew up thinking that was the natural progression. So I did my engineering degree, then I did my teaching degree. I spent 7.5 years at university, did all the typical studying, and I got my master's, and I did all of that. And then when I left this relationship, I mean, I put all my eggs into the one basket thinking that was going to be my life. I had it all pictured out, we're planning kids, everything. It was all happening. And then suddenly it wasn't. So it was like, well, what do I do with that? And that really for me was that moment of awakening, because when everything that I had attached myself to got pulled out from under my feet, it was like, well, what do I want to create from here? But I think the best thing I did in that moment, and this is something I'm forever grateful to myself for, without knowing it, obviously guided through, something within me, was I didn't just create something else. I didn't just attach to the next thing that came along. And that free flowing nature and tapping into that intuition is really what allowed me to go further than what I could have imagined. So the life that I have now is not a life I could have picked for myself. It's better than a life I could have picked for myself. And this is where I say to people, especially my coaching clients, I tell them all the time, you just don't know what the universe has planned for you. You think you want X, Y, Z, but the universe is trying to give you this completely different reality that's so much better, is so much more vibrant, And so if you release the attachment and you go into a space of surrender, you realize that the universe wants you to have your absolute best, most magnificent life ever. And you just have to get out of your own way to make it happen. And I'm so grateful to myself for the decisions that I made and the choices that I made, back 5-6 years ago, because I allowed myself to be led very blindly, may I say. This is where my blind faith has actually gotten me into all sorts of wonderful adventures. because I trusted in that. And so even though I didn't know the end of the story, I didn't even have a goal. Like at no point did I say, oh, hey, I think I'm going to run a studio. It was so organic in the way that it happened, because all I did was take the next step, and then I took the next step, and I took the next step. And next thing I know, 6 years later, I have an amazing business. And, I was like, wow, how did that happen? And it was better than anything I could have planned. And I think that's what happens when you release and surrender the attachments to the things that you think you want, and then life gives you what you actually desire, which you may not even know, because people don't always give themselves a chance to even ask what they want, right?
100%. And I think that's, like, I think this is where I'd like to, if we can go back a little bit further. So we go back to potentially when Eesha Patel started to want the picket fence, want the family, want some of that stuff. Went from the transition of the child that was really adaptable through school and everything else, to where we got to a point where Eesha Patel started, I suppose, in a way, a little bit conforming to what other people saw that, the reality to be, or what we're supposed to do in life, right? And where would you see the transition sort of began for you, where you started to, and it's not a right or wrong, but where you started to think that, you had to do certain things to have what you wouldn't like, have that happiness, which now you have, which is nothing what you thought back then, you know what I mean? So I'd be interested to know how that transition happened for you.
Look, I remember when I was 5 years old saying to my parents that I'm going to go to university. I don't know how that got embedded in my consciousness, but something that my mum said, that it was just, education was something that they really valued. And my parents come from quite a difficult background. They actually struggled quite a lot in India. They had a lot of interracial, interreligious sort of stuff going on in their family. And we had a, Hindu marrying a Muslim, which back then was like atrocious. So they struggled a lot, and eventually for them to pack up their whole life and move to a new country was huge for them, with two young kids and then a third child later on down the track. And so there were certain things that got embedded into me from such a young age, because my parents just constantly kept saying that this is the right thing to do. And so for me, there was never any doubt about it. I knew that I was going to go to school. From 5 years old, I was saying I want to go to university one day. I didn't even know what it was, but something in me was like, I want to do that. So I had this desire, whether it came from them, whether it came from me, I don't know. I mean, I was a kid, but I followed the path. So I ended up getting to 17 years of age, and then it was just the next logical step. Yeah, of course I'm going to go to university. And I was, like, I was an A grade student. I did all the things. I studied very, very hard. I was quite the bookworm. I was quite the nerd in school, very, very academic. Followed all the steps, was absolute goody two shoe, and I just did it because it seemed like that was the right thing to do. So I didn't really rebel against the norm. It wasn't until actually the ending of that relationship. So we're talking 2015, that when the life I thought I wanted and the life that I had was no longer going to be, that was the first time I'd even considered an alternate reality.
Yeah.
Until then, there was only one pathway. There wasn't actually any other option for me. It was just like, this is what I'm going to do, and this is how it's going to be. And you know what? I felt safe in that. Like, I'll be honest with you, I liked the idea of that. I wanted that, because the idea of, being 21 years old, finding this beautiful man that, I was absolutely in love with, and, having that whole mapped out for me, it was like, cool, there's my life. It's sorted. What I didn't see coming was how unhappy I was in that. Because towards the end of that relationship, I did go through some depression, and there was quite a lot of unraveling of that happened after the relationship as well. And I realized that the things that I thought I wanted weren't really coming from me. It was conditioning. It was like just the stuff that people told me, not just my parents, but society in general.
Totally.
You just get told, you do this, you go to school, you go to uni, you get a job, you get a house, you find a partner, you have kids, you settle down, and then you repeat the whole cycle for the next generation. That's considered life. And so I thought that because that's what everyone else had, that's what I wanted as well. And there's nothing wrong with that life. I mean, if people want that life, please have that life. Many, many of my friends have gone down that journey and they're very happy in it, but it wasn't for me. And I think that was the real brave thing, in recognizing that that wasn't the life that I wanted. And I'm so grateful now that I didn't continue down that path, because the life that I have now is so much better than that. But it only happened through a really massive wake up call, massive reality check, where everything I thought I wanted just had to crumble away. And that kept the space for something new to come in, which I didn't know what it was going to be. It just allowed another open door. And I guess that's where it kind of started, in that chain of thought of, well, maybe there's another way to live life.
Yeah, totally. I think that's similar to myself in regards to a couple of things, like, I mean, I was living this life that was just repetitive. And, I was told by even medical professionals and whatever, and the people that were told this was your life, this is what you're going to live, this is who you are now, and yes, we can try and help you and do little bits and pieces, but you kind of just got to accept what you are and where you're at, right? So I totally, I resonate with that on a different sense in regards to, I was at the time accepting that was my reality. And I was told by those around me, people around me, I was surrounded by people that had similar beliefs and going through similar journeys and all that sort of stuff. And it just felt normal, right? And as much as I was struggling within that reality, for whatever reason, it felt safe. And as crazy as that is to think with a bit of my journey, and so do these guys by now, that of wanting to kill myself to where I am today, to think that in between was a comfortable place to be. And that frightens me even now, thinking back, going, how did I get to a point in my life that I believed that was a comfortable place to be? And I think that's, for me, like, if we kind of bring it back again, like, there'll be a lot of people out there going, oh yeah, it's all great for you, Eesha. Yeah, you're single, you got no kids, blah, blah, all that sort of stuff. You can't, you can create this life and whatever. If we were to speak to some of those people, or even aspects of ourselves, and, myself, and even that person that wanted that, back in the day, Eesha, of yourself, if we're to speak to those people, like, I have had children, I have those things. So, yes, I am a man, and, some may say, well, it's easier for a man. I beg to differ, but anyway, I would say that, I suppose where I'm going with this, I'd love to know your point of view on how people that would say that they're living that life, the picket fence, and don't see a way out or a way forward. What sort of advice could you give to them?
That's a great question. I mean, look, if you have that life and you're happy, great. If you have that life and you're not happy, that's when you need to change, right? Ultimately, it's a personal choice. And I think sometimes what's lacking in society is the set of options. It's recognizing that there's more than one right way to live your life. I mean, there isn't a right way, but just, what's right for you. And so if someone's in that position right now, where I was all those years ago, and they're genuinely unhappy with that, I think the best thing you can do is start asking yourself some real tough questions and actually reflecting on what you want. Yeah, I find it amazing. Like, even now, I work with so many high level entrepreneurs. I'm talking like, people that have like multi-million dollar businesses. And sometimes I'll ask them, what do you want? And they can't answer it. They can't answer that simple question. What do you want for your life? And even in entrepreneurship, I see, people that are just on the hustle, the grind, and they're like, yeah, I got the 7 figures, and I got this and I got that. And then, I mean, this doesn't apply to everyone, but some of them are very unhappy. Some of them aren't, some of them are in alignment. And this is where, for me, I talk a lot about alignment. There's what's true for you, and that's all that matters. It's not about what anyone else is doing. You just have to figure out who you are as a person, what it is that you actually want in your life, and what is true for you in that moment. So I think that the first step really is, just asking yourself some difficult questions and allowing yourself to truthfully answer them. Because I think, where we get very caught up, and I know I did this as well, is I lied to myself, like, I convinced myself that I was happy in a life that I clearly wasn't happy in, because that's the life I thought I had to have. And I clearly wasn't happy because I was depressed, and got to a point where I actually was seeking professional help on this. And I still wasn't acknowledging the fact that it was aspects of my life that I was not happy with, because I had, to the standards of everyone else in society, I had it all. And so when I ticked all the boxes on paper, I couldn't understand why I was unhappy. And it wasn't until I got deeper into spiritual development, personal development, I started asking myself some very difficult questions, and I got clear on what I wanted. That's when things started to shift for me. Now, in saying that, I can also add, layers of the journey, because there's where I was back then, but what I wanted also changed over time, because I then created things. So my first business, I created that, and then I didn't want to do that anymore. And so I think this is where sometimes we get really, too comfortable in the life that we create. And we tell ourselves, well, I created this, but we don't allow ourselves the opportunity to change that, and to recognize that we as human beings are constantly growing and evolving. So the business that I created in 2015, I would never create that now. Like, I I would never go back and do that again. You know, it's just, it was great while I was doing it, but there's no way I'm opening a business like that now, because the person that I am today has grown, has evolved, has different ideologies, has different needs and desires to the person that I was 5 to 6 years ago. So I think it's acknowledging the growth and change that we have as human beings, and keeping up that, I guess, that self-questioning as a constant reflective practice, not just something that you do once. You know, you go to a retreat, you do a journaling exercise and you go, this is what I want. It's like, you have to have that continuity in your practice, and to keep checking in and to keep being present with yourself and your desires and your growth to where you are in that moment, so that you can then start creating a life that's in alignment for you in that moment, knowing that that alignment could also change at any time. And you have to be able to free flow with that.
Yeah, totally. And that's huge, Eesha, I think. And look, I just really want to touch on something, and I think this just sort of come into my awareness. Like, people hear the word, spirituality or spiritual journey or all these sort of things, and they think it's this little bit of taboo, right? And I've always talked to you about the fluffy kittens and and the rainbows, and trying to bring that back. But now, for me personally, like, everything you described to me it's just a holistic way of being, right? Now, whether people want to call that spirituality, or they want to call it, they're doing that through religious, or they're doing that through just, disciplined action, or whatever they're doing within their lives, everything you kind of described to me, then, like, now myself, I would say that I have a spiritual practice too, right? But not a lot of people would resonate with that, and that's not an issue at all. But if I take that back, for everything you just described to me, with everything I'm learning, through the masters and everything that I'm doing, the studies I'm doing, behind the scenes, that's a holistic way of life, right? That's just, and when we say holistic way of life, it's, let's not just worry about, the monetary. Let's not just worry about, the family. Let's not just worry about a certain area. When we say holistic, it's just about bringing all aspects together, right? We're talking about mental health, physical health. We're talking about spiritual health. And when we say spiritual health, we're talking about looking after ourselves, looking after our needs when it comes to what we want, who we are as a seeker, who we are as an explorer, who we are as, the way we want to see our reality, or the way we are seeing our reality. So if you were to, I suppose, look at that word spirituality and put that into more of a holistic scientific point of view, how could you describe that in a way that people would go, okay, yeah, there's no difference really from column A or column B?
Spirituality and science, that's an interesting one. It is one that I think about a lot, and I do come from a very scientific background. First degree was engineering. I've done the physics, the chemistry. I've really gone through the whole academic pathway. I used to teach at university, in the engineering arts as well. So it's something that I spend a lot of time thinking about. And to me, really, it is just two sides of the same coin, because what it ultimately has come down to me is my quest for understanding life, whether it's through the matter or whether it's through the esoteric. And so I've done both. I've really explored, I've studied, how molecules work, how atoms work, how, the body works to some extent. I've done studies on psychology. Like, there's been so many things that have just piqued my interest. And, even when I was at university, I used to just, like, this is how much of a nerd I was, right? And still am. I'm never giving up on learning, right? I used to have all of my classes, and then on top of that, I would randomly go and attend, like, psychology lectures and stuff, like, for fun, like, in my spare time. So this was something that I just did. It was something that I really, really enjoyed doing. And what I discovered in doing that was that even, the humanitarian arts, like psychology and that, plus the engineering and the spiritual studies I've done since then as well, they all were trying to answer the same question, which is, who are we as human beings? How do we fit into this reality? And how does the world really work? So I think, whatever pathway you go through in that line of questioning, for me, it's just been this ongoing journey of learning of myself. And where I've transitioned more into spirituality, it's been more from the frame that we create the reality rather than matter creating our experience. And I think that's been the biggest shift. So if I had to put them in some sort of distinction, science really comes at it from this perspective of, or from a matter perspective, not so much quantum physics, but, particularly like the old school sort of, sciences are very much about, this is matter, sun, there's the sun, the earth goes around the sun, the moon goes around the earth, like, then you have your particles, and it's a very, very matter focused approach to things. And even when you're studying things in the sciences, it's very much about looking at things, observing through a microscope, like seeing the physical, tangible, observable elements of the way that the world works. Now, when it comes to spirituality, what I discovered was that it was more of an internal experience. The
Yeah.
beautiful part about all of this, though, was when I started to make connections between the two, and I realized that both aspects of it are really just trying to answer the same thing, which is an understanding of who we are. And God, I can't wait for the day when the two worlds just kind of come together and the scientists realize that the spiritual people have been trying to do the same thing. And the spiritual people, give a bit of credit to the sciences. And because I don't think either of them are right or wrong, I think they just have, different lenses and different perspectives to the same thing. And particularly when it comes to things like energetic healing, when you're working in like what I call the quantum field, and I'm working with the processes of thought and matter and, visualization to shift things in the body, I've literally seen through distant healing physical changes happening in people instantaneously through like esoteric processes. And so, some of these things would be considered like not provable by science, or they'd be considered absolute, like pseudoscience kind of stuff. But at the
Yeah.
end of the day, I see results. So I see results in science, I see results in spirituality, and what I see in both of them is an exploration of the world around us. And I think as long as we continue that exploration and we keep an open mind, there's so much room for expansion in that. And I don't think it would be fair to say it's just one or the other. I think it's really about bridging the gap between the two, so that we can start to say, well, maybe there's a level of truth to how we experience the world and the co-creation of that with the matter around us as well.
Yeah, totally, Eesha. And I think, for myself personally, I can't see a separation, honestly, between spirituality and science either. For me, I think they're much of the same. I think that for my own personal journey, I think there's, and there's some really exciting stuff. People saying the esoteric studies or not. It's, I think if we look back, many, many, many moons ago, everything we know today was esoteric at some point, right? So, let's, we get to that sort of point where, everything we know that we would call factual today was at some point a theory, right? And then it's gone through processes and whatever to get to where it is. But what I love is that there are things within science at the moment that are trying to understand and see things. And even that distance healing you're talking about, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that there are studies that science have proven that things like people going in doing meditations in a certain area can actually have change. When I say change, they have seen dramatic change within those areas, or they have definitely had seen measurable change within those areas where people have gone in to potentially, war-driven countries or whatever, where there's whether it's been a day, something's changed on that day or week or whatever, they have been able to see measurable change. And I believe that science also at the moment is measuring, I don't know if we'd call it consciousness or whatever we call it, but they're trying to measure at the moment, things like the heart and conscious minds in regards to, around the world. Like the hearts, I believe what's it called? Heart, I think you would know about it. Heart
There's a
science.
few. So there's the
Yeah.
Maharishi effect, which is the study that was done with about 7,000 people meditating. There's also the Global Peace Project, which has placed these counters around the world, and they actually measure certain events and the correlation. There's been a direct positive correlation between meditative type experiences and certain world events and the vibration that they've picked up. And then there's the Heart Math Institute as well, which actually studies the heart field of the human body, and they've identified as a torus field, like an actual electromagnetic field around us, and they call it heart coherence. So, I mean, you'd have to go to their website to see it in the way that they've explained it, but my understanding of it is that they've actually done studies where you can have two people in a room or multiple people in a room, and you can create what they call like a heart coherence. So when people drop into that heart vibration and they bring that mindfulness and that peacefulness, it changes the field, and there's a very measurable effect to that. So there's many studies on that, and even Dr. Joe Dispenza, he's done quite a lot of research on the brain waves when people meditate and the healing effects of that. So it's definitely, it's an emerging science still to some degree, but I think there's definitely validity in that. Now, at the end of the day, for me, I just, like I haven't gone down the road of measuring a lot of what I do from that perspective, but I see results. I do the work. I take people through guided processes, and suddenly they're bodies are healing, they're manifesting money, they're manifesting relationships, things are happening, you know, and the shifts are instantaneous. So I've seen enough of the proof in my own reality. And while anecdotal, that to me is enough to go, okay, cool, there's something more in this. And it's why I've just continued to keep exploring and keep, you know, asking the questions and unraveling this, because I think there's just so much more. And I think, you know, just the journey of being human, if you keep questioning and you keep asking and you keep exploring, you're only going to keep evolving, right? It's only when you get stagnant and you say, oh, we know it all, that you start entering very dangerous territory of non-evolution. So yeah, I think we just have to keep asking the questions and just keep progressing forward in that way.
Yeah, look, and yeah, I think that's amazing, and a very, you know, very good point. You know, for me personally, I think that, you know, with this sort of stuff, like the exploration is huge, right? Because for me, that's been like I say in this show, right, and you'll hear it at the end that I say, you know, explore, create, and be, right? That's a saying that I have, right? And the reason I do that, because when I actually got to a point of exploration, like everyone's going to have their own differentiation, they're going to do it their own way, and they're going to have their own experiences with that. But I say to people all the time that I work with and that I've been around is, you know what, take all the shit out, take all everyone's opinions and everyone's bullshit and everyone's explanation, because everyone's got their own explanations, everyone's got their own way of describing and doing things. Take all that out. What is your personal experience? What is your personal experience in this moment? What is your personal experience, you know, that you want to have? Now, for me personally, and I think you just described that quite well yourself, I go off what my personal experience is. I go off what I'm experiencing within my reality and what's happening within my reality. Now, if I can see that what I'm doing is creating a difference between what I was experiencing before, that I may have seen as not favorable or not exactly what I wanted to experience, to where I'm doing different things that are allowing me to experience things differently, have a different reality. And if we take reality out and just leave it as an experience, if I can have an experience day to day that is different and closer to potentially what I want to have, then something's happening, right? There's something happening. Now, if I've spent the last 10, 18, 5, 6 years in that loop doing the same thing day in and day out, but yet I'm doing something different, whatever that is for me, that is allowing me to be able to have a different experience, that's measurable in my own life. I don't need science to tell me what it is and what it isn't, right? I don't need someone else to tell me what that is and what it isn't. I know within my own experience that this is different.
Exactly. Right. And I think there's value in that. There's value in personal experience. And I think, well, actually, I see this a lot in spirituality. You know, people second guess themselves because of just their experience of reality doesn't match what they think it should be because of what other people have said. And so they start to go, oh, well, did I really see that? Did I really feel that? And I really, you know, quite a large part of my work is giving people, facilitating for them to develop that confidence so that they can then trust in that experience for themselves. Because sometimes when you're in, you know, those deep meditative states, you'll see things, you'll hear things, you experience things, and people go, well, is that real? Well, was it real in your experience? Because that's all that really matters, right? If you have an internal experience in meditation that changes your emotional state, changes the way you feel about something, that might even facilitate, you know, say some sort of emotional healing or something like that, that's a real experience. It doesn't have to happen outside of you in order for it to be real for you. And so the question of what is reality, I mean, we're getting pretty existential here. It really helps you to ask questions around, well, what is reality? At the end of the day, I know that for me, I experience the world through my 5 senses, and I have my internal world. And, you know, yes, there's an entire reality outside of me, but the way that I experience that reality is inside of me. And so for me, my reality is actually within. And this is where my spiritual focus comes from. It's what is my internal reality right now? What am I present to right now? There's all this stuff that's happening out there in the world, and that's always going to be there, you know. But at the end of the day, I get to choose peace, I get to choose calm, I get to choose my internal state. They're the things that help me feel empowered in my practice. And so that's what I always bring it back to. It's very simple in that sense, you know. It's like, well, there can be anything happening outside, but if the experience of your reality is inside of you, isn't that the bit that you get to choose? And so that's where I find, you know, there's a real level of simplicity of just being present to that, being open to that, and go, well, hang on a second. If my reality is inside of me, that's all I need to know. And that's, you know, that's the highest level of self-awareness that you can have.
Yeah, 100%. And that's definitely been my journey too. And I'm going to take this back a little bit as well, because, and kind of really put a different spin on it. Now, if we're having these experiences within our lives and we're able to, people say, oh, I can't control what's going on inside. I can't, whatever maybe questions or whatever, monkeys or whatever in the room. That if we go back to a minute and go, well, okay, as we've discussed before, is this an experience I want to have? Is this what, let's not even put happy on it. Am I having the experience I want to have? And is this the experience that I want to have? Right now, the more that I was able to, through exploration, through discovery, through doing mentoring and finding things out for myself and doing all this other stuff, I was able to change my current beliefs, my current perceptions, my current awareness, and a whole lot of other things, my environment, so on and so forth. But the more that I was able to do and look into these things and explore these things for myself personally for what I wanted within my reality, the more my reality started to change, the more that my experience on day to day was starting to change, right? Because if we say internal or not, like why 100% I agree with you that those aspects allowed me to, my internal experience today is way different to what it was before, right? And to be even putting my hand where it is today, to to actually be looking and really trying to live from the heart, like tell Benjamin 2 years ago that that's the type of life you're going to be having, I would have seen that as bullshit, and I probably would have called someone out telling them that they were full of crap, right? But here I am today, really focusing within my own heart with really what I want. And I found my true warrior, my true power, my true honor with myself, really going within and being truthful with myself, what I want in my experience, right? Because the more that I'm able to support myself in the true experience I want to have, the more that I'm able to allow myself to be safe and vulnerable in the true experiences I want to have, the more everything else around me changes. Is that being, would you say that, could you add to that, or was there another way you do explain that, Eesha?
I think you've articulated it beautifully. I mean, I can really resonate with that. It's just at the end of the day, it is that simple. You just choose the reality that you want. And yes, I totally acknowledge, like I've been in a state where I'm like, but how do I do that? And how do I find peace? And, all the thoughts are going off, the emotions are firing, and, it's a big thing. And it's been a practice. And this is, again, coming back to what I said at the very start. The one thing that's got me through all of this is my meditation practice, because no matter what is going on in my life, I can choose to take 5 minutes in my day and just breathe and realize, hang on, Eesha, you're okay. Like you're actually okay, and you take a deep breath. And when things are getting really stressful, when things are just getting really full on, I think just having that higher perspective sometimes makes a massive difference, because life happens, it's how it is. Like, I think, at the end of the day, the biggest fears that people have ultimately come down to death, right? Like, let's just put it on the table and say that's ultimately it. If you trace every fear that people have, ultimately it leads to you dying or someone else dying, right? That's pretty much it. And when you recognize that, you go, well, actually, death is a part of life. Let's come to peace with that. And if you can be okay with the worst case scenario of, what can happen, then you can step it back and go, well, actually, I'm not even in the worst case scenario. 9 times out of 10, most people aren't, I mean, obviously there's some pretty extreme cases out there as well, but like, the majority of people that I would talk to, the problems aren't as bad as people make them out to be. It's just in the moment of that, there's a real intensity of emotion. There's a real intensity of that experience. And it's cool. It's fine to acknowledge that, I think emotions are emotions, and you can't say that one person's fear or anger or whatever is more or less than anyone else's. You can't really compare apples and oranges like that. But what you can say is, well, hang on, is it okay for you right now to acknowledge that this is the experience you're having, whatever emotion, whatever stress, whatever thing that might be? And would it be okay for you to take a deep breath right now and acknowledge that inside of you, regardless of the way that you're feeling right now, there is an element of peace. There is an element of that centeredness, that calm. Can you remember a time where you have felt that expansion, that love, that joy, where the universe has looked after you? And most people can find that. Again, we're not talking about extreme cases here, like extreme traumas and stuff like that, because there's a lot of depth that needs to happen with things like that. But across the board, like 80 to 90% of experiences are just not as bad as we make them out to be. So if you're allowing your life to really fall into these pitfalls of these deep emotional dramas, you really can bring yourself out of that in most of the time, just by acknowledging that inside of you all these emotions exist, all these energies exist. And the simplest thing that you can do in any moment is literally pause, take a breath, recognize that you're okay, and then choose the experience of your internal reality, because ultimately that's what creates the world around you.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And yeah, look, I think that's definitely right, Eesha. And that's certainly been my experience. And if I like sort of go into that a little bit more, like if we take it back, like people even think about the word meditation, right? And they go, oh, I don't want to meditate. What's this meditating? Blah, 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 blah. And you said it quite bluntly that breathing is a form of meditation, right? And simply coming back to breath and having some sort of basic breathing techniques can allow us to change our current experience that we're having into something that may be able to be transitioned to a different type of experience, right? So that breath itself is just amazing. And I think, what people's experiences or what people's beliefs may be around meditation could be widely, we could really extend that to something that is simple as just breath, right? And, right from, sitting there in the, cross-legged in the, meditating, whatever, we can do those things too, but we don't have to have, we don't have to start there, most certainly, right? And wherever we go with that is important, but breath has been important for me too, right? To be able to and I find more and more in my daily experiences that meditative state of being able to reach that, that little bit of calmness in the mind, or when I need to, what's the word I'm looking for? When I need to compose myself, it's as simple as a breath. It's a simple breath. It can change the whole way I see something or I'm experiencing something.
Yeah, exactly. It is that simple. I think people just overcomplicate life, to be honest.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. Well, I'm just being mindful with the time here, Eesha, because I know we've both got to get off to somewhere. Is it all right if I ask one quick final question? Well, it's actually a series of little questions that I would like you to answer in one thing. So if you were able to go back in time and spend 30 seconds with yourself, what wisdom would you share with yourself? And what wisdom would you share with your inner warrior to create a life by design? At what age would that be, and when? And why? Sorry, at what age would that be and why?
That's a great question. I would go back to the earliest that I can consciously understand the wisdom that I'm about to give myself. I'm going to say like somewhere between 3 and 5, I reckon. And the one thing I would embed into myself back then is, Eesha, just relax. It's all going to be okay. And that's it. I mean, we've spoken about this, but it's like the true warrior isn't like the rah, it's actually like that strength to be able to just, be in that stillness. I think that's really what it comes down to. And the true warrior really is the one that knows when not to draw the sword. So I think it's taking that breath. I would tell myself, just relax and it's all going to be okay.
Yeah, totally. Thank you so much, Eesha. I really appreciate having you on today. And, it's been a great journey. I have actually worked with Eesha with her origin activation, and I can attest for what she does. And it's amazing. And it's allowed me to be able to experience a different point of view and a different perspective in my own life. For everyone that's listening, Eesha, where would they be able to find you or hit you up if they wanted to work with you or find more information?
Yep, website or Facebook. So Eesha Patel, EESHAPATEL. If you go eeshapatel.com or originactivation.com, come join my Facebook group. I have a group called Awakening and Ascension, which is always good fun. There's lots of meditations. We do a lot of planetary work, spiritual mentoring, etc. So definitely come say hey.
Thank you so much. And remember, guys, explore, create, and be. Well, thank you for listening. If you found this episode valuable, please take the time to like, share, and subscribe. It really does make a difference. It helps others out there explore their warrior, create a life of choice by design, and be all that they wish to be. Remember, explore, create, and be.